On this episode of the Home Studio Hangout, I get interviewed by Brad Phillips of Studio 101. This is a excerpt from the 101 recording podcast that I was on a couple months back when we did a batch recording of a bunch of the guys in the studio. If you want to check it out, go check it out at Studio 101 Recording Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy this conversation that me and Brad had, we interviewed all of the engineers and guys that work out of the studio. We've also done some other podcast episodes with some people that also work out of the studio. But yeah, without further ado, this is my episode of the 101 Recording Podcast with Brad Phillips. Check it out.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Studio 101 Recording Podcast. My name is Brad Phillips, and today my guest is Mr. Andrew Simmons.
It is I.
Andrew, thank you for being here, man.
Thank you, man.
And we're going to talk through a whole bunch of fun stuff today with Andrew. First of all, Andrew, kind of give us a 30,000-foot view of like where you're from, what you have on your plate, what you do for a living day today.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of a thing.
That's a complicated answer, actually.
Yes, I know. That's why I asked the question.
That's a complicated...
I posed the question that way so it would be complicated.
That's a complicated answer. So let's see. We'll start from how I got into it and then what I actually do now.
Sure, yeah.
So originally from like the small town called 6 Mile. I don't know if you know 6 Mile.
Absolutely.
Right outside of Central on your way to Lake Kiwi. Mm-hmm. One road town. Grew up there and kind of started doing music stuff there a little bit. Been playing piano since I was like 3. Got put into like, music classes and all that kind of stuff. Musically gifted dad, loud mom who liked to dance and sing, but did not so much musical giftedness, but yeah, sense of rhythm and whatnot. And then we ended up, moving closer and closer to Greenville, as both my parents kind of got more into their jobs. So my mom's a nurse. So she moved over to Easley and started working there full time as an ER nurse. My dad works for the South Carolina Probate and Parole and Pardon Services. And he became a director at the Pickens County. And this is probably information you don't know about me, actually.
No, well, I mean, yeah, this is great.
And now he, became director of Greenville County, and then now he is the director of South Carolina's probation and parole, like everything.
Wild. That is crazy.
Yeah. So like as the years have gone by, I've like slowly moved closer to Greenville, and throughout that whole time, kind of just been doing music stuff, marching band class, all that kind of stuff. Started playing trumpet in band when I was like 6 or something. And it got really, really, really interesting. But then I kind of skipping ahead a couple years, I decided I wanted to go to music school because I thought I wanted to be a band teacher. So I went to Southern Wesleyan for like music education stuff, realized I really hated teaching. Not that I really hated teaching, because that's kind of what I do a lot now.
Yeah.
I really hated teaching middle schoolers.
Yeesh. That is side note. I'll interject this as a side note. This would be a great piece of information for people to know. Yeah. So it was like for a few months to make some extra cash, I did some substitute teaching. I did a long-term, here, listen to this. I did a long-term elementary school music substitute deal.
Yeah.
And that was great. Those kids were super attentive.
Elementary's awesome.
It was fantastic. Yeah. So then I got shifted over to the middle school for a little while, which is, if you're listening to this right now, watching this, and you have kids in the public school system, I think it should. Here, listen. I think it should be a requirement. This is way more information than anybody needed to know.
Probably,
but I think it should be a requirement that you have to go in and substitute teach a class of middle schoolers 100%. One time.
100%.
And then you would totally comprehend the crazy madness that these kids have going on in their physical bodies and brain. It's just bizarre to me.
In college.
So, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, in college, I think they were vetting me, right? I did my first like shadow with a middle school band teacher.
Right.
That was the thing that made me go, no,
nope.
I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this.
That's great.
Which is funny. I'll come back to like the teaching thing in a minute, but it is funny. That made me drop out from school.
Man, the middle schoolers they killed you.
Well, I didn't realize I didn't want to teach, and then I was going to a private school, so I was like, I don't want to spend
the money,
tons of money, doing something I don't know what I want to do.
Right.
So I went out on the road playing guitar and bass for like some country guys, just touring for a while. Came back, started working at a church. The church had a studio at Marathon. Brian Cox, who I think you know, Brian. And so Brian kind of showed me the ropes of the studio world. And yeah, that's kind of where that started as far as like studio production stuff. From there, got involved with GAT3 up in Charlotte, did their recording program, did a lot of, shadowing people, learning under people, all the while kind of doing my own projects.
Yeah.
And then worked at Anderson University for a while. Hilarious because I dropped out of college. Hilarious that I was working at a college after dropping out of a college, but doing their production stuff, their theater, and like kind of helping Joe Wehunt, who I guess he's still there.
Yes, Joe's still there for sure.
Yeah, so kind of helping him with some like recording process stuff while I was there for a year or so, and hated that job. Realized, and it's not even that I hated the job. I realized in that job that I really wanted to go full time, like doing working for myself, doing music production, that kind of thing. I also realized I really didn't like working for other people in that kind of capacity.
Yeah.
Me and the dean just did not get along.
Yeah, like sort of the realization of like the corporate business and being an employee,
the hierarchical thing
didn't quite line up with what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and I like the freedom of kind of being able to go and do what I wanted to, and I wanted to make records. So so I ventured out on my own after that, and slowly over the course of the next like 4-ish years, quit that. Technically, we agreed for me to leave that job. Yeah. That's how we'll say that. And slowly transitioned, got a part-time job, and then doing record stuff, and then slowly transitioned that over to full-time job.
Yeah.
So now, as it sits, long way to say, full-time music producer. I run alongside you 101 Media here, which is doing like all of this podcast stuff.
Yep.
When we work with the Barndo Co. and we have a couple others that we're working on. I have a podcast called the Home Studio Hangout, and interview a bunch of really cool music producers and get to pick their brains about, working in home studios and working on cool records. And we've been able to talk with people who've worked on like Lumineers records and like a bunch of A-listers, and all the way down to like just my buddy Matthew Parker, who's like a self-contained music producer, making awesome killer records on Spotify. So making a living doing that. And so, that's been doing that. And have a wife and a child. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of like me, the gambit right there. Right. Work on a bunch of different types of records. Yeah. So,
well, it's cool. I always love to have, any guest that comes on. I love for you to kind of share your story, because it shows the kind of the progression of, if people that are out there watching or listening that are interested in the music production world, the recording studio world, it kind of gives people an overview of like, hey, this guy got from point A to point Z, and it looks like it went all over the place. Or there was like a laser.
It went everywhere. Yeah. Mine went everywhere.
Well, like even being able to see sort of somebody else's journey sort of helps you kind of like digest the things that are going on in your own life, and it helps to go, hey, that guy kind of experienced some of the stuff that I'm going through. So maybe I'm not the only one out there that's kind of going through some of this stuff.
What's really funny is like, so I was listening to Ian talk with you about like kind of how his upbringing, and he was like, yeah, I just kind of like have always been around a studio. I had vastly the opposite of that. I grew up in a very small area. I didn't know this. This is crazy to think about. I went to college in 2009. I did not know that producing records was like how it functioned and how a job was until I was in my sophomore year in college.
Wow.
So I got started way later than everybody else. I was already in my 20s when I learned that this was a job.
Yeah.
And then I started trying to figure everything out. Got a copy of Reason, got a copy of Ableton, started like learning what MIDI was, learning how to produce, learning how to make records. And yeah, that was a weird, it's also a weird time because we're talking like 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
So it was like the beginning of home studio stuff. And information out on YouTube was like a 50-50 shot of whether it was worthwhile or not. You know what I mean? And I didn't know there were studios making records here, in, like on this side of town, because I'm from the total opposite end of the upstate.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm small and not from this tiny town, and not knowing that any of this exists. How in the world? It took me going to Nashville, seeing, I went to, I think it's Ocean Way in Nashville at the big church. Went there, saw that room. I was like, oh yeah, this is sick, but there's no way I could do this. You know, people probably have to move to go do this. And he showed me their B room. They have a really nice B room. And I was like, I can make this in my house and just do this. That was the thing that like shifted my brain on, oh, you don't have to have this absolutely massive space. You can have this really smaller space and then occasionally use the big space.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting kind of a process or progress of things in my mind in the time that I've been kind of in the engineering and commercial studio world. You know, like my training came from literal Nashville, living in Nashville in the mid-late 90s and experiencing like how records were made and like, you know, we were going to Ocean Way, County Q, I could name the Omni, you know, all kinds of places, going and watching how these records were made at the time. And that was a period long gone, no longer exists. That was a thing that existed in its own. And then the evolution of how things have progressed up to 2024 are super interesting to me. And it's like, I sort of feel like a little bit of a chameleon personally in my own journey as to the fact that like when I learned how to engineer and do the things that we do in a studio, it was literally all 2-inch tape and a 48 channel analog console, and you had to print your compressors and you had to not clip, you know, your pre's to go into tape because like that was like the only way that there was to record music at the time. But then I'll one up you on the learning the softwares and stuff. So like when I started, you know, when we basically opened up the studio here, was a time when, oh my gosh, so much crazy digital technology. It was like digital technology vomited all at once. So there's like ADATs, DAT tapes. The Mackie hard disk, Mackie and Alesis came out with hard disk recorders, and Pro Tools had come out, you know, mid-late 90s as kind of a standard recording software.
But Pro Tools still had proprietary like stuff you had to have their hardware and interfaces and all of that.
Correct.
In order to make any of that stuff work.
And it was not native.
No. And that was actually part of the reason that I ended up going to Propellerhead reason first and Ableton first was because I was a broke college kid who had no money to buy these at that point, especially in 2009, 2010, like very expensive pieces of equipment in order to have a home, quote unquote, home studio. I was just running cracked versions of these softwares.
Yeah, that was a whole nother era. And like the software world that I was, I had to learn. I didn't know anything about any software of any sort. I was like, I don't understand what we're talking about right here. But, so when I was able to get my first version of Pro Tools in like 2003, I think we officially I locked into Pro Tools because it was the software that emulated all of the analog processes that I had ever known. The screen looked like all of the auxes and subgroups and everything that I had used to have my hands on. We gravitated towards the Pro Tools thing, and then I had to retrain my brain, kind of, so to speak, as to like how you set up and run a session.
This is now the tape machine, not the reel to reel.
Yeah, but it also was like it ended up being an affordability thing that the industry shifted, and like
tape's expensive.
Stuff that I was working on in Omni Nashville when I lived there was now in a music store down the road that was a like semi-affordable. If you walked in with a credit card, you could buy it. But previously, it was like a sort of kind of a small little world of people that could afford the stuff to do.
It was every studio was I think it's fun. You see, we were looking at a thing today. It's like multi-million-dollar studio or whatever, coming to places. And it's like, it used to be every studio was a multi-million-dollar studio because it had to be because tape machines were freaking expensive. Tape itself, freaking expensive. And then the transition to digital, because I came in on the cusp of this when I first saw a recording studio. First time I ever stepped foot into like a recording area, it was a dude who had a tape machine. And so I remember that, and then I remember the next time going into like an Ocean Way, it was already Pro Tools. And I remember that. I remember seeing that like hard line transition of like, oh, we've just hard pivoted into software now.
Right.
And it's weird. I'm not even that, like, I'm 32, so I'm like not. I like that cusp of like the transition is very, very. I'm aware of it, but I wasn't working in it.
I know
actively.
Right, and it's a thing that like my generation of engineers and producers and whatever have kind of been privy to the fact that like we have come from the literal analog only way to record through all of the whole processes of everything now that we do remote sessions with people in another town, and there's so many options and ways to get the same result but in a different process.
You can literally take an entire API console, be like, I don't like that sound, and switch it to a Neve console.
And
just like that.
And the emulation has become so good that there's still purists who's going to argue, and I do love to put my hands on an actual piece of gear. It's just kind of the way it is.
We have the ones here that like I think give it like just an extra, because it's the Newton channels, right? The 16 channel. We have 16 channels of Newton channels and channel strips, and I actually think it makes everything just sound immediately better if everything's off. And it's just the pre's just sound great. And the EQs, obviously we can shift things a little bit more, and I think now because I distinctly remember the transition into like full digital. And then, because emulation was awful in 2015. It was awful. And then, around 2015, it started getting a lot better. You started seeing like Helixes and Fractal doing their stuff, and Kempers. Like it kind of started with guitar amps, because I think that was the first thing that people wanted to kind of get back into. Which by the way,
and I think it was last week, a bunch of us guys were talking in here during the session, and like throwing it way back to like the Line 6 Bean pod.
The red bean.
And it's like thinking about how that thing sounded now, as opposed to like the new little Tonex boxes that are this big.
Oh yeah, dude.
The Tonex boxes are insanely realistic. Fight me, I don't care. Like, they sound incredible.
Or the Neural
now.
DSP quad cortexes, which are honestly about the same size as the Red Beans.
Yeah, and I mean, like, but it's just it's progress in all of those things,
it's crazy.
and figuring out the emulations and the how to make a digital amp feel.
Well, and now we have headphones that emulate entire rooms.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Which is insane.
And it's pretty accurate too.
Oh, it's super accurate.
You can fight me on that one too, but it's a thing. Like it's
for those kinds of things, for the VSX headphones specifically, you and Jesse both kind of got me locked into those. And for those, it's actually not even the fact that it sounds the same for me. It's that it sounds good.
Yeah. Usable.
And usable, and the fact that I can context switch between rooms quickly.
Yeah.
And then use the system-wide version to reference mix to other things. Yeah. Doing that in an untreated room, you could do it. I feel like it takes a lot longer for your ears to adjust for the reflection adjustments that your ears have to do, the EQ adjustments. Like if the room is too bright, or there's way too much low end, or all that kind of stuff, when it's a balanced space already, quote unquote balanced space already, or it's at least consistent.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to make those mixes translate, because you can then go, okay, this compared to this stuff, maybe like the mix you're working on compared to a mix you are really proud of or are referencing against.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to go, these two are going through the exact same everything. Even though this one's mastered, this one's not, I can still hear where I need to shift to make, my mix be a little more similar to whatever I'm referencing to. It's crazy that you can just swap around to all these things, and you have certain things you can check the low end on, certain things you check the mid range on.
Yeah, and that's that's one of, you were talking about the home studio or home producer type setup thing, and that's one of the humongous hurdles that and even in our my control room here that's been treated, like the listening environment for especially for like home setups and stuff. You can spend $50,000 on a small mix room at your house just for the build out.
Yeah.
And to me, like, through all the years and all the things that, different technologies that I've been, a part of or whatever, like, the listening environment for mix and tracking is incredibly important, especially for your like stress level.
100%.
As to whether you can trust like what you're listening, what you're hearing is actually what's happening. Because the problem in badly treated areas is the fact that your brain and ears are tricking you into thinking that you don't have enough low frequencies, and you keep adding low frequencies. And then when you get to the dreaded car mix test, you
blow your car speakers out.
Yeah, and then you're so frustrated and so mad. It's like it's like there's so much frustration in like, this doesn't sound like what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
And being able to just from a personal level, like in the control room here, I ended up being in a spot where like I cannot go forward in working in this business if I can't control my listening environment and 100% like trust what I hear in the room is actually translating to the mix.
Yeah.
So like, if anybody wants any advice about about home studio builds and like, producer rooms and stuff at your house, like your speakers and your treatment, you have to do whatever you need to do. In my opinion, you need to do whatever it is you need to do. And the money that, people ask, like, where should I put my money? Well, like, you should really focus in on like your listening environment and being able to trust what you hear in your room, because you're going to save yourself so much stress and all the things on the back end if you just go ahead and try to make sure you commit to that up front. And that means like your reference monitors. Like I ended up going with the Barefoots here, which totally revolutionized everything that was going on in my brain and my mind.
Well, it changes, especially the 3-way, and you have the 2 subs on either side. Like it, firstly, the sub positioning changes everything.
Sure.
Versus, I don't even know if you were running a sub before.
So my previous setup that I had run for years was like Dynaudios and a sub.
Yeah.
And for the size of the room that I had,
those Dynaudios get really shrill too.
Actually, like there was too much stuff going on for my room. Even though you crank it up in the room and it feels really great, like in the mix environment, it was really not great. And Dynaudios work great in maybe another room.
Sure.
But like you have to, I think part of it is like figuring out your thing that you need to make the flow work.
The really tricky part about that, and I agree, it's what sounds good to your ears. How do you listen? And then on top of that, you need to listen to a lot of speakers, which is really hard to do if you don't live in LA or Nashville, because you can't go to a Vintage King and just sit there with your mix and that's the other thing. Even if you do go to an LA or a Nashville Vintage King or a Sweetwater or something like that, and you sit in their room and listen to all these different speakers, like it's not your room.
Right.
So that's where it gets even more complicated. It's like you kind of have to spend the time checking, maybe going to one of those places, narrowing it down to 3, and then getting those shipped to your place, setting them up, listening to them for like multiple weeks at a time. And then if you hate them, ship them back.
Sure.
And then try the next set and take notes and do all that stuff. And it gets so complicated that I can understand why people are just like defaulting to headphones.
Sure. Well, I mean, and in defense of Slate Digital, the emulation stuff that they have worked tirelessly, I'm assuming on, is very, very usable.
Oh yeah.
And we're probably going to get hate comments about this this opinion, but like the VSX environment that you can sit inside of and listen to is helping engineers to get to a final product faster
100%
than previously.
You're talking
because it's usable and it's realistic.
Well, and it's consistent. That's the other tricky part is rooms are inherently inconsistent. So as long as you have the most consistent factor, then you're going to get a more consistent like end result on the mix side.
Sure.
So, I've talked, like I said, I have a podcast. I talk to a lot of producers, and most of them work in home studios. And everything that everybody has ever said, I asked a lot of them, even on episode or not, I'm like, what is the most important thing that you would like tell new people to, look at? Is it, is a lot of, if they're producers and they're not mixing a lot of the time, it's like, make sure your songs are good, make sure you spend the time in pre-production, like a lot of that stuff. But if they're a mixing engineer, generally it's learn your room more than any other space.
Right.
You should know your room better than if you're going to mix in a room, you should know that room the best you possibly can. So pick your speakers, get in your room, and literally listen and tweak your space as much as possible.
Yeah.
Anything outside of that is basically worthless.
Yeah.
Because once you get into the inside stuff, then you start getting into like DAW preferences and plugin preferences. That's kind of minutia.
Yeah.
Once you get into there. But the thing that's going to make it translate and the thing that's going to have the end product be the best and get you the quickest, highest quality product is going to be making sure your room and your speakers are, them like the back of your hand.
Sure. Yeah. And, that's one of the things that I hear a lot of, new interns and students and producers who are trying to learn the process. That's just a huge hurdle.
You can't fast track it.
Yeah. But now with the advent of, stuff like the Slate emulations
the
and
VSX
all the things,
headphones,
it definitely is a tool that I wish I would have had like way back in the day, because it would have saved a lot of stress and headache and like frustration and all the words,
100%. Well, and especially for someone like me who's mixing like multiple different genre music all the time. So like I think I mix a lot of heavy music, like a lot of metal, like not so much like what Ian does, where it's like more hardcore stuff. I'm more on the polished metalcore side, and then like pop music and hip hop music, and kind of in that space of the like slightly more polished things. That's kind of tends to be like where I lean. And genre wise, I can have like specific rooms for specific genres. Now, because even in a listening environment, sure, all of it is technically just sound, and you're just making the sounds fit in specific, frequency ranges or areas or whatever. But there are just like certain vibes that hit different in different scenarios. And so now I have an NRG studio where I mainly mix like hip hop or pop in. And I have like the Mike Dean studio that can mainly mix hip hop in, and like have all of these references that are going to get me to the end product like 20% faster than using one set of speakers in a room's decently treated, but it's not the best. But in an inconsistent room, and not being able to, and only maybe even checking those things on like some biodynamic DT 990s. So it's like having those three options versus having the plethora of options that I have now that I can make genre specific decisions in gets me to the end product way faster at a much higher quality.
And it's, I've had this conversation with people before, and it's kind of a business sort of philosophy in general. Like, and we're not talking about fast because we want to get stuff done fast and quickly, and like you want to rush through things. That's not the fast that we're talking about. It's like, I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years and learned how I do what I do. But it took me 20 years to get to the point of where I can do what you want me to do in a very short amount of time. But it also took me 20 years to learn how to do that thing. So that's the whole thing we're talking about with the efficiency and speed of things.
And for me, efficiency isn't even about like getting the project from beginning to end quickly. It's actually I think I talked to you about this, like feedback loops. I really like short feedback loops. So feedback loops meaning like, if I get a mix in, I do a rough mix as quickly as possible to get it back to the artist, so that I can go, am I headed in the right direction? Because if I'm not headed in the right direction and I do all of this work out, if I spend all of this time trying to fine tune all of these things, and like I was headed in the wrong direction from the get-go. Like I wasted everybody's time. And I wasted my time, I wasted their time, and I'm, now my billable hours are, I'm tripling my billable hours. So, which is not fun for anybody. I'm losing money at that point. So I like shorter feedback loops so that it feels more like I'm bringing the artist along the journey with me, rather than them handing it off to me and then me going, here's the thing. If that makes sense.
No, that's totally a thing. And, while we're going down that path, so to speak, talk to us about, I'm going to lump kind of a bunch of this in kind of one thing, but like,
for sure.
Your process for client acquisition in regards to, I know you're involved in a lot of projects where basically you just get stems from another studio and you're mixing and people are contacting you because, hey, we've heard Andrew's mix thing. We want him to do his thing to our files that we recorded somewhere else. So talk to me kind of about like maybe how you attract a client that is just wanting mixing, or like what's the difference between a client who's just wanting mixing and maybe you have a different client that's contacting you to do a full production. Maybe you're tracking everything. Maybe you're like virtual instruments, building tracks, all the things. Like, give me kind of an overview of how you have that set up in your own personal production world.
So we'll start with just like the just mixing side, because it gets a little more complicated when you get into the full production side. But as far as client acquisition for the full mixing side, a lot of those recently have become obviously a lot more word of mouth. have early on, I did a ton of free work. A ton of free work.
And that's a whole nother conversation because like just to interject a couple things here, like when I first started here and when I really got serious about doing what I'm doing here from Studio 101, like I would personally reach out to certain artists that I was sort of gravitate towards and say, hey, like I'll give you 3 hours of free studio time. Come check out what we do. If you don't like it, your files are yours. You know, just little things like that, or even a mix. Like, hey, let me do a mix for you. If it's not what you're looking for, no harm, no foul. Like, there's things like that I think are sort of understated sometimes in this world that you can do in the audio, music production, recording world. Like, you can do some of those things to gain some traction and some networking and other things. Yeah. But I can say on the flip side of that, like, I'm not saying and advocating like underselling your pricing or like giving huge free discounts. That's not what I'm saying.
I only did the free work whenever it was so, and it's kind of I'll distinct that a little bit more. Yeah. So if it was an artist that I liked, was at least one or two like what I perceived as levels above where I was currently mixing. So like a band that would pay me to mix versus this other band that I liked and thought was doing really great stuff. I enjoyed their music. I liked them as people. Whatever. And then their musical quality, I perceived as like they had notoriety, a rung or two above the bands I was currently working with. Yeah. Those offer a free mix 100% of the time out the gate, especially when I was starting. I don't really do that as much now. I'll do it if it's like a mix off between me and like two or three other dudes where it's like I've had to do that before. It's fine. It's like I'm gonna do my thing. This other guy who mixes a little, more grungy or whatever, and like we'll all like get the stems. And it's funny because the band is always stressed about those, but me and all of the other guys are always friends. So it's just like, yo, what'd you do? Oh, that's pretty cool. Yo, what'd you do? So it's like, it's not weird at all.
That's great.
Which is kind of cool and being in, the general area. But anyway, so reaching out, trying to do a lot of free work up front. And actually what I loved the most and the thing that did the most for me is getting people's really crappy stems and showing before and afters.
Sure.
So showing, here's the stems that they sent me in like just a balanced mix. Yep. And then here's the mix that I turned it into. That was a massive thing, especially early on whenever the rise of the home studio was happening. And this was pre-pandemic as well. So all of these people were like, I can record at home. I'm going to try doing it myself, whatever. Yeah. And then I was able to help turn their stuff into like, playlistable great recordings or mixes or whatever.
Sure.
Much more than they ever expected.
Right.
So that helped, and you get one of those and then you kind of use that as your leverage.
They tell their friends.
Yeah. Well, and then I was really at the end, it actually has less to do with the onboarding process for me. It's actually like the offboarding process. So I would work with a client, make sure that I went above and beyond, like as far as like underprice over deliver, especially early on, underprice over deliver, and then not only get testimonials from them, but also make sure to get 3 other artists from that band that they knew who potentially could be looking for.
Awesome.
And then have that artist connect me with those people. So I'm not reaching out cold. Yeah. I'm having somebody that they know give me the in.
Yeah.
And be like, yeah, we just worked with Andrew. He was really great. He killed these tracks. Just wanted to introduce you. Thought you might be looking either way.
Yeah.
Be cool to connect you guys.
Sure.
And that's like this. I'm never asking for a connect to try to work with these people. I'm always asking for a connect to connect with them for any way that I might be able to help them. So it's like, connect me with them. Hey, I see you guys are playing in this area. Do you know this band that I know? I'm going to connect you guys. And so I try to be the connector of people, and that has led to a ton of work.
Yeah, that particular piece of information is like Bitcoin, gold nugget, whatever you want to call it. Like that's a cheat code, so to speak. Like when you understand the fact that like, you have competition out there that are other producers and other things that are happening, right? Okay. There's people out there right now who do what we do,
sure,
and work with the same genres, and some of them are super great. Some of them are not so super great.
Yep.
But both of them are going to get projects that you wish you had.
Sure.
And the thing about it though is like when you have a sort of posture and a mindset of like, hey, I'm going to be the dude that sort of helps connect the dots. I think it pays dividends in the end when 100%. You have that mindset of how to approach what we do for a living. So,
I have a really good example of this working out in my favor. So there's a band called Heirloom from North Carolina. Now they worked with Howard Benson recently on a record, big rock producer, Breaking Benjamin, all that. Whenever they were first starting out, I love those people to death. They are awesome. They were a young band and they were pretty good. They were going to a studio and they were getting very okay stuff. I don't want to be mean. It was, it's like it was fine. It was passable, but they had been a band for like 2 months. I don't know if I even ragged the studio on that or if I ragged the band on just not knowing what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Questionable. But I'm friends with two of them. Nolan, their vocalist, and Kevin, their guitar player, and both of them are like primary songwriters in the band. And I was in a band, am in a band called Harm. It's like a post-hardcore band also from North Carolina. Kind of sounds like Under Oath, but with a female singer.
Right.
And we were playing a show with them in Columbia. I was friends with them, and I saw that their drummer had Nikki had a tank top on of the band The Ghost Inside, very popular hardcore band. Well, I know the guitarist for The Ghost Inside. He's my really great friend, Chris. So I call Chris and I go, yo, dude, this band's a big fan of you. I know he was like doing record production at the time. They weren't back on the road yet. It's a very complicated story, but he was producing records out of his house in Baltimore or Frederick technically. And I called him. He was like, yeah, dude, send me a video. Shot a video of them playing live. And he was like, yeah, dude, this band sounds really cool. They're super young. I checked out their stuff. He was like, connect me with them. And I was like, awesome. Sounds good. Went to the band afterwards. I was like, hey, shot your stuff over to my buddy Chris of The Ghost Inside. He says, you guys were sick. Would you want me to connect you to? He's trying to produce some bands and take some bands under his wing. He's like, would you want to work with him? Yeah. And they were like, heck yeah. 100%, I'm not getting any of the work on this at this point, right? Zero of the work. Connect them. Chris goes, hey, dude, thanks so much. They signed on for a 5-song EP. Like I think it was 7 actually. 7-song EP. I was like, that's sick.
Yep.
Do you want to do post-production? Because I do a lot of post-production. So like synth, strings, production drums, effects, things like that.
Yeah.
So at the time, especially then, Chris had hired me to do a couple things for The Ghost Inside and for his other band, Texas in July. And I killed it for them. And he and I had, really connected really hard on that. And he was like, dude, this band could definitely use your touch. And I was like, great. He was like, would you want to co-produce the record with me? Come up, stay with the band. I was like, yeah, dude, that sounds like so fun.
No way, not doing that, right?
Yeah. I had to drive all the way to Frederick, which was like an 8.5-hour drive, but it was fun. It was a fun time.
Nice.
So drove all the way up there, stayed with them for a couple weeks, mid-pandemic, and very dangerous.
Nice.
So that was fun. But we knocked out the record. It was super cool. And then we get back. They're going through the editing process and doing all the stuff. He's getting all the mixes like prepped, and he gets sick. like really bad sick, like so sick he thought he was going to lose his hearing in his right ear. Sick.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really bad. And he calls me. He was like, dude, they were prepping for a show in California. And he was like, dude, I don't know if I'm going to be able to mix this record.
Crazy.
And he said, do you want to mix it? And I was like, sure, dude. I was like, are you sure? And he was like, I was like, you got all of these other friends who you're friends with who could potentially mix this record. He's like, yeah, but you were there for the co-production. You know what they're going for. I trust you to handle this.
Yeah.
I'll just have them pay you my mix rate instead.
Right.
And I was like, all right, sounds great. And so I mixed that whole record, got that credit. That record ended up being the thing that launched them into getting a call from LA from Howard to work with them. And like, nice. I was the reason that connection happened to Howard.
Yeah.
All because I said, hey, this band's really good. I like them. I have a friend who is in the band that they like, and I want to connect them.
Yeah.
Led me to that band has now tree branched into 12 different projects over the last like 2 or 3 years from me working with that one band.
Shout out to band t-shirts and drummers wearing band t-shirts.
I know, man.
That's the whole reason for the whole story. Right?
Exactly.
So,
no, but it's a long, complicated story to say. I saw an opportunity to connect a friend with a really cool band.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with me making money or getting work at all.
Yep.
Led to me getting the entire project over an unfortunate circumstance. But then since then, I've worked with Chris because he knows and loves me and know I can handle projects.
Right. Yeah.
So he and I co-produce a band called Hostile Array, and they've done really big things. And he's all gotten me to do post-production on a ton of other like bigger metalcore bands that he's worked with. So like it's turned into a really cool relationship because I just fostered the relationship inherently to begin with.
Sure. And that's a part of this industry that I think is a valid thing that, you got to be able to, you have to be able to talk to people and network and do the things that don't seem obvious maybe.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? Like that's something that probably is not obvious to most people, but like networking with people and like connecting dots when maybe they didn't know they needed to be connected.
Yeah.
Those kind of things are like, that's a super good point to make.
Well, and I would say even on that note, to jump into the podcast side of things, connecting the dots where people don't know that need to be connected. I feel like that is the entire reason that me and you were like, hey, we should do this podcast thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think you got a call from TJ, who owns a barn, or co-owns, I guess technically, the Barn Co. And Barn Dominion builder here in town. And you called me and you were like, what do you know about podcasting?
Yeah.
I was like, actually, a whole lot.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing a podcast for 3 years at this point.
Right.
That has done pretty well. Self-sustaining. It pays its own bills, which is all it really needs to do. And it helps me get work and grows my network. But then you were like, I think we could do this thing. I was like, cool. I'm going to call this. This is a really good example of me pouring into a whole bunch of people. You get a phone call, you call me, and I go, all right, I got the guys. I was like, I called 7 people. They all gave me information. I parsed it out into what made the most sense for us to go for. And we were able to build out, I think in a week, right? It was about a week. You called me.
100%, yeah.
It was about a week later. I was like, all right, here's what you need to buy. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's the process. Here's how much we're going to charge. And I had like a business plan ready to go.
Sure. Well, see, like, what a lot of people don't know about me partially, I guess, is the fact that like that pumps me up. That super pumps me up to be able to be like, okay, this is an engineering thing. Okay. I guess I'm going to get slightly philosophical on this, but like it's an engineering mindset thing to me that is inherently ingrained in a lot of us guys who do what we do. So the essence of engineering is, so there's a problem. It's not necessarily a problem, but there's a thing that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Or something that needs to be solved. So like you get presented with this thing, and I love it. It's like, here's the thing, and run with it. You know what I mean? That's what I love about doing what we do. It's like somebody is saying, this is the thing, this is the end result. They basically present you with the end result. And you're like, sweet, I know how to connect all these dots to do the thing that you want to do, but you don't know how to do that. I can do that. And that's the thing that sort of pumps me up about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
In the fact that, like, you know, there's a lot of times even in the studio setting where you're presented with, this is the end result. This is what I want the end result to be. Yeah. And then we have to sit down, or we have to plan, or we have to do whatever we have to do to literally figure it out. And maybe if it's something we haven't even ever done before. Yeah. Like that just like excites me so much to be able to, like, fun stuff.
That's the fun part about studio. I mean, having the session guys in a couple weeks ago before we both went on vacation, and having them in here, and I was hanging out, and, you know, we were just watching them go. We had an artist in a track. She was going to come in later, and they were like, all right, she gave us these references. Here's the demo. How do we get the demo to get to sound and feel like these references that she gave us? And charting it out. We're all giving opinions. We're all shooting ideas back and forth. And then we land on an idea, and then we execute.
Sure.
And, like, that is so fun. That's my favorite part of the studio, right? Is saying, here's the initial product. Here's where it needs to go. Let's get it there. And that getting it there is so much fun.
Yeah, that's the huge, whether you're, I know a lot of times that you're, when you're building out a track on your own, you know, you're in Ableton and building stuff out from the ground up and all that stuff. And so whether you're in that scenario or whether you're in this tracking room with live musicians, to me, it's the same end goal. It's like, but it's super cool to see, like, this super simple, maybe iPhone voice memo idea. Yeah. And then it just gets built into this incredibly cool, finalized idea that is produced out. It sounds great, mixed. Yeah. You know, the artist is pumped. Like, that's the whole goal. And it sounds like a simple process when I lay it out that way.
Very not simple.
It's way more complicated than that. But, like, just the fact of, like, every time we work on any project, it's still super exciting to me to just hear, like, sometimes a really grainy, like, iPhone voicemail recording of an idea, and then it all gets put together into this one big final idea that makes total sense, you know?
Jesse and my buddy John McLucas both do this type of content on TikTok and Instagram sometimes, where, they will have the demo of a song, and they'll play the demo, and then partway through the demo, it cuts to the final product, and, like, hearing that just, like, hard change of, like, how everything shifted and all of that, that is a fast version of the process, but that is a very real getting from 1 to 2 on that scenario is the fun part for us. It's like, that's what we love about making records, right? Sure. It's like making that. I mean, it's really the same thing for podcasting too. It's like, oh, I have an idea for a show and I want to have a conversation. How can we make this look, feel, sound cool, and also enjoyable to people on the back end?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, edit it together, make it sound cool, and have, like, a cool intro music and all that kind of stuff. You asked about the mix stuff. So the mixing stuff started with the free stuff and then kind of transitioned into, you know, giving things away for free and, like, trying to connect bands and all of that. Now, because of all of my connections, it's a lot easier for me to get hit up for a mix, send a band to a really great producer in their area, and then them send me really great tracks. And that has only just kind of caused a snowball effect to now I don't have to do quite as much heavy lifting on the social side. Yeah. Full production, on the other hand, social media comes into play a lot more with full production. Yeah. Just because the nature of what it is. You're asking somebody to spend a lot of money and a lot of time with you, so they want to make sure that they feel comfortable with you. They want to make sure that you understand what their vision is. They want to make sure that you understand that you are ultimately going to be worth the money that they're going to spend on you. And especially when they're spending sometimes multiple thousands of dollars with you. Yeah. You're going to make they want to have instances of comfortability. That's where I think that social media can be, like, really a game changer for like the full production side of things. Sometimes the snowball effect from the mixing side can play into the other thing, but the full production, me and Shama working together, had a heavy hand in the full production side of things too. When you have a song go super viral, it definitely helps.
That helps
get work.
That helps all kinds of everybody.
Helps get work.
Together.
Yeah.
Well, man, I'm probably going to wrap up here in just a second, but I guess give us the short version of like, what do you have going on right now that you're super pumped about? What do you have coming up that you're super pumped about? Whether it's artists or projects or whatever you got going on. Give us a few things.
All right. So I just got back from Houston a couple weeks ago, or last week. Maybe it was last week. I don't remember. Time flies. That record I was very stressed about. Went, tracked it in person. It's going to be a very cool record, and I'm very excited about it. Very like 2000s alt rock, Bryan Adams and the Cardinals, Counting Crows kind of stuff. Very cool. Very different for me, actually, for what I normally do. Yeah. We got James Tucker coming in for a couple more songs in July.
Yep.
The last song he did really, really well. And then he went to our vinyl, and that's only kind of elevated his status in the greater country world. So I'm excited to do 2 more with him in the band. That one's going to be really fun.
Nice.
And then on the other side, me and Shama are working on a handful of new songs. For those of you who don't know, Shama's a comedian.
Yep.
He and I blew up off of a VeggieTales remix song. We'll just gloss over that real quick. Yeah. But you can look it up. I'm in the music video. But I produce for him. I produce all of his music. He and I are working with an artist from Seattle named Peabod, who's like big in the like clean Christian world.
Nice. And
that song is really good. I'm very happy with how that song is coming out. Very cool. So yeah, and then as far as music production, that kind of goes there. Working on some content stuff. 101 Media, we're trying to put together some new clients and things like that. If you're a client and you want a podcast, like hit us up.
Shameless self-promotion. Yeah. If you would like podcast production, give us a call.
Give us a call.
Message.
Yeah, or even just if you have questions about podcast production, like look at how beautiful all this looks. You know what I mean?
We can make that happen if you need a podcast.
Exactly.
So just let us know.
Exactly. Home studio hangout wise, I had some really cool engineers lately. Had some really cool producers on, and I mean that's just going to be more of the same. Mm-hmm. That's a week to week thing for me, and I really enjoy doing that. It's a remote podcast most of the time. I had Jesse on, and we did it here while I had a setup. Yeah. I need to have you on. We'll probably do I might cut together one of these episodes into ours or something. Nice. But yeah, it's good. So if you want to talk to me, I think you can hit me up through the 101 portal, or you can go to musicbydrew.com, musicbydru.com, and I'm at musicbydrew everywhere on socials, YouTube and otherwise. Yep. So
very cool.
That's pretty much it.
Well, man, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, man.
And we sincerely appreciate you, man.
No, fist bump. Fist bump.
That'll be a great edit.
Yeah.
But sincerely appreciate you coming in, man, talking with us.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. If you could take the time to like, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio platform, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed, and also leave a rating and a review. It helps the show get out to new people, and we're trying to grow every single week. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast, and we'll see you next week.